We have 3iQ CEO Fred Pye joining us. Fred, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Emily. So nice to see you both.
It's wonderful to see you too. Now, you heard in our markets chat just a few seconds ago that the markets are fairly quiet with prices for both Bitcoin and Ether trading below their 20-day moving average. CoinDesk's markets analyst Glenn Williams Jr. says that trading volumes will be key to watch since they could amplify or mute the sentiment behind any directional move. We got to get your take on this. What are you thinking?
Well, right now, quiet is good. So we're happy to have quiet. I mean, it's been a spectacular year, obviously, for the price of the digital assets and, in the space. And I think what we're really interested in seeing is consolidation. We're not as concerned with the short-term news movements. I think, like your headline just before, that the million wallets are out there. We know we're all here for the long run, and I think the longer we stay, the upside resistance level at 30,000. When it breaks through that, I think you've got to be convinced that these digital assets will hit all-time highs again. But the theme for this year is definitely going to be use cases on the institutional side.
Let's talk about Canada for a moment. 3iQ is a digital investment fund manager, was also the first Canadian investment fund manager to offer a public Bitcoin investment fund. And we recently had some news from Canada, basically that Binance announcing that it would stop their operations there. And the reason they gave was a challenging regulatory environment. So, it was, I guess, refreshing to see Canada steal the headlines for having a challenging regulatory environment instead of the United States. But what do you make of that? I mean, do you think that's a sort of fair accusation?
Well, I think there's 115 pages by on the lawsuit against Binance that probably didn't help. Canada actually is really leading the world in terms of working with the exchanges and getting them regulated and registered, such as we were. I remember when we created our first hedge fund, kind of back in 2014-15, they said we had to pull the fund, and it was an exempt market fund. And we said, it's an exempt market fund. Why would we have to, pull it? And they said, well, we're not sure if Bitcoin, Ether are currencies, commodities, or securities. And I said, well, we're pretty sure 3iQ's licensed to manage currencies, commodities, and securities. So how you determine what category it is, it really didn't affect, it shouldn't affect the product that we were managing. And they said, yes, but we do regulate 3iQ, and we would like to see 3iQ show proficiency and be specifically agree to terms and conditions to managing assets in the digital asset world. So we agreed to those terms and conditions. And our next step was to get a publicly listed Bitcoin fund. And that took 5 years and a good chunk of change. But 3iQ really broke the ground by being the first regulated Bitcoin fund and major exchange listed Bitcoin fund in the world.
Can you just explain for our audience a little further? Can you maybe compare and contrast or juxtapose the Canadian regulatory sphere against what's going on in the U.S.? In the U.S., we're seeing a lot of regulation by enforcement, a lot of firms saying they need more clarity, but they're not getting it. How is that different in Canada?
Well, I think what we've seen in the U.S. is we've seen people try and say, well, we're gonna list and then, see how the regulatory fills in. In Canada, we were the opposite. We said, let's get this regulated. Now in Canada, when we filed our first Bitcoin fund got rejected, but you're allowed to then appeal. And then you're allowed to go to a public hearing. And we were rejected for 5 reasons, which we challenged the regulators on. Those 5 reasons were custody, auditability, pricing, market manipulation, and and not in the public interest. And so we challenged the regulators on all of those aspects, and in a resounding victory, we won on all cases, and we could prove that you could run a proper ETF and a proper Bitcoin fund in Canada.
Where do you see the most exciting opportunities in the crypto market right now? Any specific areas, tokens? What are you excited about?
Yeah, I'm really excited about, and it's not going to happen quickly, the institutional business that everybody's been waiting for, the whales, for the institutions. If I told you we're getting 10 RFPs from institutions on a daily basis, I'd be fibbing, because we're not. I think what we've seen is the first experience of institutions getting into Bitcoin was with GBTC, and they have not, in our view, possibly done their fiduciary duty. We follow the fir tree hearing very, very closely, and so without them dealing with the discount, the institutions have all been burnt. We were like $50 billion. I mean, it wasn't a small amount, and so after Grayscale started trading at a discount, everybody went and opened up accounts on FTX and said, okay, we're going to custody ourselves because these fund players aren't playing above board, and they're not playing the proper game. And that FTX experience didn't work out so well for them as well. So through IQ, we've created something called the OCIO, which is an outsourced crypto investment office. And basically, we work with institutions principally on education, because you have to work on their investment policy statements. You have to work on understanding the proficiency of understanding the space. And when we speak about Bitcoin, and again, I'm Bitcoin grandpa here with, I've been lecturing on this for a long time. And when people realize that Bitcoin's nothing but, a secure value transfer protocol, internet protocols don't disappear. It is here forever, and it's very powerful. So we use that education process. But then we take a look at what are the risk profiles of these institutions, and we adopt different products for those risk profiles for those institutions.
Fred, we have Crypto Mom and Crypto Dad, and now you are our Bitcoin Grandpa. Thank you so much for introducing us to Bitcoin Grandpa this morning. The last question I want to ask you, you note that Bitcoin's 3-month correlation to NASDAQ has dropped to 20%. Talk to me about the significance behind this.
That is, when we saw the futures come in and everything else and risk on, risk off assets, I've always lectured that Bitcoin's the most beautiful asset because it's a non-correlated asset class. It started to show correlation with the risk on movement, and having that separation is critically important, because any global multi-asset portfolios, every hedge fund manager, we're always on the quest for that perfect non-correlated asset that can produce risk-adjusted returns. And Bitcoin in any portfolio for the last decade has absolutely put your performance way over the charts.
Fred, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That was 3iQ CEO Fred Pye.